Welcome to the YourTown television program, sponsored by the Naval Postgraduate School Foundation. I'm your host, Lyla Englehorn. NPS has a reputation for bringing interesting people into the Monterey community, and I'm joined here today by Lieutenant Commander Santhosh Shivashankar, U.S. Navy. You're a Lieutenant Commander in the U.S. Navy. What brought you to the Navy?
I went to math and science, like Magnet High School in Texas. And that program was basically your junior and senior year. They say, hey, just go live on a college campus, and it was at University of North Texas, and take college courses. And you'll basically graduate high school with 2 years of college credit. You would have gotten some of that experience. And while I was there, one of the briefs we got was from the submarine nuclear recruiter who came by and said, hey, you guys are all on this STEM track. You are younger than most people we'd kind of try and solicit there, but because of those 2 years of college credit and the calculus-based physics and the calculus you have, you all qualify to go into the nuclear field. Heard the pitch, and I thought, that's something different. I was going to be planning on being an electrical engineer. I come from 3 generations of electrical engineers, and so I was like, well, maybe this will be something different, And I thought, well, I'll do this for a few years, get the benefits, and move on my way. But that was 17 years ago now, and so I thought it was going to be a very short stint, and it turned out I liked it, and hopefully go the whole way.
Absolutely. And so you joined the Navy, and then did you go on to do undergraduate work?
Yeah. So the program is odd in that what they do is when you're 18 or when you sign up, their only real criteria is you need to finish your STEM degree in 2.5 years. So I had the 2 years of credit, but really that just knocked out all of my electives and whatnot. And then I got to University of Texas at Austin, and had to finish out all of my electrical engineering coursework. But I signed up when I was 18. They said, okay, now go to college, and here's the clock. 2.5 years. You need to come out of this with your electrical engineering degree. So that was a grind.
But you made it, clearly.
I made it,
Good.
It was a path that I'm happy I did, but I would not recommend to other people. I graduated before I was 21, and I think it's always funny. People say, oh, you went to college in Austin. It must have been beautiful, whatnot. I don't know. I know the inside of that electrical engineering building, and that's about it.
So then you're now at Naval Postgraduate School, getting a master's degree in network operations and information technology.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit more about that program.
Yeah, so I think when you break up what the IT world is doing, I say for us in the networking side, we're building the highways more than the cars. So what that means is all the interconnections. It's not as maybe cool and sexy as the guys who are making the Lamborghinis, but very necessary. So for network operations and technology, what we're looking at is how do we efficiently exchange that information? Because you may have made the best program in the world. If it can't reach out and touch anyone, then it's just on your computer. The usefulness is a little bit cut off. And that's what we look at. How to make that efficient and secure for the DoD.
Interesting. Then, how long is that program, and where are you in your program?
Yeah, so they recently changed it to a 2-year program from 18 months. I think a lot of that's kind of in response to the incidents we've had, and the focus on what the internet and these information exchange things, these technologies are bringing to the table.
Well, this is the information age, so that makes sense.
Right, yeah. So that extra spotlight. So it's a 2-year program. I started in September of 2017, and so September of this year I'll be graduating.
Wow. And every master's student at Naval Postgraduate School needs to do a thesis.
Yep.
Have you started work on your thesis yet? Chosen your topic? Underway?
Chose the topic. Well underway is hard to say. Right? You always feel behind on a thesis. I feel, but we're looking at trust in autonomous systems.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of people are looking at this, but we decided to look at it from the angle of operational risk management. So that's kind of the DoD framework for how do we manage risk. It's our own flavor of saying, is this worth it? How much risk should we take? What's the reward? And then look at what the other studies have said about each of the things that actually builds trust, whether it's between human machine, human non-human, and a lot of the times that's kind of the way we trust animals, right? You have maybe teams that have canines with them.
Right.
How do you build that up?
Yeah.
And then saying, how does that apply to a machine, to something that's not actually biological? And our angle is, could we quantify that? Now, it's going to be a swag to say, like, hey, this has a trust number of 62, and compared to another system that may have an 86, what does that really mean? But we want to take a stab at it. We've got to start somewhere and say, hey, let's try and quantify it and say, what are the models that are already in existence that talk about, well, how does trust build up and how does it fall off? And what are the scenarios that make each of those things happen? Turn it into a big equation and then start rolling from there.
Excellent. So yeah, robotics and autonomy is something that's being developed very quickly within the military environment as well as just the greater industrial environment globally.
Yeah.
And you've done some work with the Consortium for Robotics and Unmanned Systems Education and Research at Naval Postgraduate School, or CRUISER, as their student representative.
Yeah.
And then you also just participated in the Warfare Innovation Continuum Workshop, Rapid Concept Generation, specifically in robotics and autonomy.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about that experience. It was 3.5 days, very rapid.
Yeah.
As a participant, what was that like?
It was great. I think we're an organization that by design we have to make people the same mold. We have to be replaceable just because of the nature of warfare. Anyone may have to step up to take any role at any time when a war breaks out, and that puts blinders on us. It's the reality of it. And so we're all going to think the same way. I thought it was really interesting to see other academics and people from other agencies. Department of Energy was one of the representatives on our team.
Interesting.
And so I thought it was great, the ideas they brought in to say, hey, well, I'm an academic, and actually if we looked at it this way, this problem kind of falls off the bone. Or this is actually a bigger problem than you think. It's not a hand wave, we could just get rid of this. And so out of that workshop, I think what we had kind of a future scenario that extrapolated a lot of the trends that are going on today. And so a more powerful China, increased globalization in the terms of interdependencies between regions. No nation is going to exist in a vacuum, and it hasn't for a while, but that'll only become more prevalent, and those webs will only grow stronger. And to say that these kind of non-war conflicts are going to be the things that really grab the headlines. They're the things that are going to be the long-term trends, because a bunch of nuclear armed nations, a bunch of nations that are economically interdependent, a shooting war is just not the optimal way to get what you need.
Yeah.
So we kind of were able to, from the scene setting of the scenario, step back and say, well, what do we want, for the U.S. in the next 10, 30, 50 years? What does everyone else want? The people we're saying are our adversaries. Well, it's not an all-out adversarial thing. They still want us to have a big production base. They want our consumers to buy their products. They just want to be better at it. And the military is one aspect of that. So we got to kind of think through that, and I thought the interesting thing was it's a foregone conclusion that the world's going to be more transparent. And when you extrapolate out that far, many of the things that we may be developing in the military right now, they may just be see-through, it may be for naught. And the thing that we found, the big trend we found, is the oceans, the airways, land, it'll be littered with sensors. And it's not so much that we need to be stealthy against that. It's that we need to understand how those work, because at the end of the day, all of that data is going to a person. I don't need to fool a sensor. I need to fool a person.
Right, that human in the loop.
Right, and so it turned into more of a psychological game. Just a little bit of noise here. The sensor can be perfect. I just need to make you think maybe it's not so perfect. And that's the way we saw, this next 30 to 50 years playing out. The new Cold War is the way we started looking at it. I think we're already well into it, and how are we? Is this going to play out the same way as the old Cold War, or is it going to be different? A lot of interesting ideas came out.
Yeah, gigantic, complex problem space.
Yeah.
In an uncertain future
Yeah.
with a lot of variables. And within robotics and autonomy, from your perspective, as you see it develop, what do you see as useful, especially from your perspective with network operations and technology?
Yeah.
What's interesting to you? What piques your interest?
So I think it's, really it is that transparency aspect, and how much we kind of give away in some of the metadata and things like that you have to put in there. So when I talk about metadata, it's kind of like, hey, when I type in a request for a web page or something, it has to go somewhere. And the way I compare it is to the U.S. Postal Service.
Yeah.
I'm sending a letter to Google to say, find me this thing. Well, it has to be addressed to Google, and it has to have a return address to me so they know where to send the response. And inside of that, I may write the whole letter in code so you don't really know what's going on, but you glean a lot of information from that, Now, maybe 100 Google searches a day isn't that, doesn't give you a lot of information. But let's say I was looking up port schedules for, country X. And the other thing it says is, hey, this is going back to a DoD server. Well, that's kind of an interesting thing. I don't need to know what you're actually asking for. Just the address, the letterhead and the addressing of those gives a lot of information away. I think that's a big problem for us, right? And so trying to fight for this concept of covertness in a world that is transparent on this networking side, it's hard, to say the least.
That, yeah.
And I think that we're just now learning the implications of that. Anyone can really see this stuff. We don't know all the places it goes. In the same way, when you put a letter in the mail, you don't know which post offices it actually hits, whose trucks it's on, who is the actual postal worker who's handling it, and where it gets scanned along the way. That can change day to day. We don't actually know some of that stuff. And when we do, we don't know what information they glean from that. So I was able to work on that kind of stuff at my last command with the Special Warfare Group. And I think that's a really interesting problem. I think it's and one that it's so big and so scary that we're trying to say, like, let's just not look that way. Let's focus on the problems we can tackle.
Yeah. So pulling that thread a little bit, you found that interesting where you came from. You're studying, and your thesis work is centered around that area a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you see for yourself in the future in your career? Where do you want to go from here?
Yeah, so for our career path, I'm an information professional. So that's the communications officers of the Navy. What we do is we run the networks, we run the communication suites on all the afloat platforms, the carriers, destroyers, cruisers, and we work on and manage the shore infrastructure. So whenever any piece of data gets sent off a ship, it goes through our comm stations and gets to where it needs to go. In the future, I'd like to work more on that transparent angle and say, like, hey, how do we hide the information we're trying to get, and say, what is the information that we give away when we do a Google search, when we search for these things, and is there a way to cut that back, or is there a way to hide that in the noise? If I send out 100 searches and it's really for every port in the world, well, then you don't really know what port I'm going to. And maybe that's the kind of obfuscation and things that we need. So I like thinking about those problems, seeing those. And then also I like getting on the acquisition side. I love this kind of long-term thinking. You know, when I buy a system now and it needs to last 30 years, I think that's just a cool problem to say, how's the system going to change? How's the world going to change? How are our needs going to change? And to say, well, today I'm going to make a decision based on that.
And it's interesting to me in this information age, the information that's available on anyone you search for, on the people side. So the information available on you, on LinkedIn, puts you as a member of the military leadership circle at the Milken Institute. And I didn't know anything about the Milken Institute. Can you tell me a little bit more?
Yeah, so Milken Institute is a think tank, and they focus on the large scale problems of the world, the overall healthcare, poverty, education, and years ago, one of the founder of the group, Military Leadership Circle, he was doing his master's, and his professor said, "Hey, I'm going out to this Milken conference, big conference, just a lot of heavy hitters, big names there." And the professor said to one of our guys, this active duty service member, said, "Hey, do you want to come along?" He went out to it, and he said, "This is amazing. The ideas being presented, they have such an impact on the military, and there's no one from the military here to even listen to where the global thinkers, the heads of industry, the heads of these NGOs and aid organizations, what they're looking at. We don't get to hear it, and they don't get to hear our perspective." So he approached the Milken organization and said, "Hey, could we sponsor some people to come out to this and have a group of mid-grade military officers to look at these problems and maybe give some perspective?" And Milken said, "Yeah, absolutely. We can sponsor people to do that." And so each year we take a batch of 10 to 15 people who apply. You have to write your essays, you have to get letters of recommendation, and are selected to go out to the Milken conference and kind of not as representatives of the DoD, but just people who want to hear the thoughts of these leaders, and then to give a perspective based on our experience. And so it's an amazing organization where the goal is to bridge the military-civilian divide. And as we kind of walked around the conference, it was amazing how many people were like, "I've never met anyone in the military." Just the circles they run in, they're like, I don't exactly know what you do. Many of them had, they have fond thoughts of the military because the number of people I ran into said, "Well, my grandfather, World War II, able to, were able to use some of the benefits from the military, get their education, and then start these amazing companies." But that's generational knowledge, and that was, that's a long time ago. So it was, it was great to see the kind feelings towards the military, but it was also kind of something to behold to say how little they knew about what we did, and how they didn't even consider the impact of the military on their businesses or world events when we're such a big force. I think we are, U.S. Department of Defense, if I'm not mistaken, is the largest employer in the world.
Yeah.
And so for any topic you're talking about, we got a seat at the table, and you may as well kind of get that perspective.
I'm so glad you're doing that.
Yeah.
Thank you for your service, and thank you for joining us today.
All right, great. Thank you.